And by the way, thank you everybody for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be able to talk about my favorite subject, which is wildlife rehabilitation. I have been doing this for about 20 years. And I have to tell you, it's just so amazing to take an orphaned animal and be able to raise it and release it back into the wild, or take an injured or sick adult animal and give it a second chance at life. It's very hard work, but it's really rewarding. But oddly enough, I'm actually not going to talk about what happens inside my wildlife facility. I'm going to talk about something that's equally important, and that is keeping animals out of wildlife rehabilitation facilities. Because quite frankly, you know, wildlife babies belong with their parents, and we don't have a lot of wildlife rehabilitators in Massachusetts. So we only want to take in the animals that we absolutely need to take in. And to do this right, we're going to need to have the help of the community. So I'm hoping that the presentation I'm doing is going to, be helpful to you. So I am going to turn off my video and start my sharing screen. All right, let me hide these controls. So we're going to talk about reuniting wildlife, keeping wildlife families together. It's just so, so important. Um, Before we get into that, just giving a shout out to Cummington Wildlife. We've been around for 20 years. It is a nonprofit and it's in my home. It's a relatively small facility. I'm the president, I'm the treasurer, I'm the janitor, pretty much everything in between. And we mostly do songbirds and wild rabbits. Mostly now at this point, I'm one of the few people with the state and federal permit for songbirds. I'm covering pretty much half of Massachusetts with that permit. So we're pretty much filled up all the time with these precious songbirds that really need our help. So our goal as wildlife rehabilitators, which is really important, we believe that wildlife parents are always the best. Now, I'm considered a competent wildlife rehabilitator, but honestly, wildlife babies need their parents. If given a good environment, they're going to give them the very best nutrition. They're going to teach them the skills for survival in the wild. And we try our best, but we're never going to be as good as the parents. So because of that, we want to make every effort to keep baby animals with the parents that love them, and the baby animals really love their parents. We need to educate the public to prevent what we call kidnapping. I'll go into that a little bit more. And make sure that we only take animals that really need our help. So let's talk about some of the reasons why babies get separated from their parents. And this is a very short list, but it can be something like, a big windstorm knocks down a tree. And then you've got, raccoon mom looking for her babies that were in that tree, or maybe it's squirrels, or maybe it's birds. We can help them get together again. And maybe it's not even a windstorm. Maybe it's a human with a chainsaw that didn't know there was woodpeckers making a home in that tree. So we can help fix that and get the family together again. We talked about kidnapping, and let me explain that a little more. Sometimes the kidnapping is accidental. It's because someone thinks an animal is an orphan. It really isn't. They just don't know the parents are nearby. And sometimes it's the mistake that the public makes that, the baby skunk, like in that picture, looks so cute. Wouldn't that be great as a pet? Well, the answer is no. It's actually illegal to keep most wildlife as pets, and they really don't do well. They belong in the wild. But things like construction and home renovations, I get a lot of calls because of that. In fact, last year, I must have had at least 3 calls from people that were destroying the deck on their home to build a new one and didn't know that there were robins that were in the corner of that deck, right at the bottom where they couldn't see it. And now they were going to lose their home. So a lot of things that we do, taking down barns where babies, are living, can really impact getting babies separated. The other thing that's amazing is trying to figure out, is an animal orphan, injured, or sick? And you'd think that would be obvious, but wildlife tries very hard not to let us know when there's a problem. But take a look at this special example. That's a killdeer in the picture. And killdeer are what they call ground nesters. You can see the eggs in the bottom picture. They look a lot like the gravel. And they're pretty well hidden, but if a fox was ever to walk up to that killdeer, um, they could see that eggs, and how's mama going to take care of that? Well, here's a video that will show you what she does. Yeah, look at that little baby killdeer. And I think the volume was off on that. I apologize for that, but they get the picture in that one. So Mama, she can't fend off a fox, but she can pretend she's injured. And she can look like she's dragging a wing and the fox is creeping up after her and she's moving away from the neck. So the fox is saying, wow, I'm going to have a great dinner. But before he pounces on her, she flies away. In the meantime, she's led him away from either her nest or her young. So that is a way that we think an animal may be injured, and it really isn't. So wildlife, they make our jobs a little harder sometimes. And let's get to the next slide. So, how do we figure out whether an animal needs our help or not? And I actually think sometimes it's a little bit like playing detective work. So, knowing the natural history of species is one of the most important things we can do as a wildlife rehabilitator, understanding how these animals live their lives in the wild. So, if we know what normal behavior looks like, we're going to know when behavior is not normal. That is so important for us. And part of that is knowing the age and developmental stage of species, because at some age, we do expect babies to be with their parents. At other ages, parents may be nearby, but not right next to them. So if we understand, what they're supposed to be doing at a certain age or developmental stage, we're going to know whether they need our help or not. We need to look at the health of an animal, and you think that would be easy, but remember, prey species do everything they can not to look sick or injured because they know if they look sick or injured, then that predator is going to go after them first. So trying to figure out if they're okay or not sometimes isn't easy. And then a harder one for me, we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, is location and safety risks. Is that area a safe place to reunite an animal? Is the mom and the baby's going to be safe in that area? It's really subjective. It's not always easy making that decision. But natural history is definitely the place that we start because some animals have a much better success rate at reuniting, and one of them is going to be the Canada goose. All right. Um, and other animals have poor success rate, like the Virginia opossum. I just want to talk about the Canada goose because, I mean, those parents, they are fierce. They love their babies. If you have a gosling that gets separated from mom and dad, maybe they're crossing the road and something happens, like a car spooks the last one, and you go near those parents with that gosling, they're going to let you know, give me back my baby, or you're going to get wing slapped, which is not going to be fun. And in fact, I have almost every year been able to take a gosling that's an orphan from another family, and we couldn't find that original family, and place it with a foster family that has goslings the same age. And I'm going to say the vast majority of times they've accepted that baby instantly versus the Virginia possum. Not so good. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There is a video, which, by the way, I don't make a lot of good pictures or videos. That is one of the things I have to do better at. But I found this on the internet that shows a little bit about reuniting a gosling. And I love this sort of thing. This is like the baby that was alone all by itself goes back to having instant family. Parents, they'll protect it, teach it survival skills, and siblings to keep it company. Now, I've done a lot of these reuniting. I'm going to tell you right now, I tend to do it more on land. And the reason is occasionally the parents reject the baby for whatever reason. And if they start pecking at the baby and getting aggressive, well, I'd rather get a net over the baby on land than have to dive into that water and go swimming. So for me, I do prefer the land reuniting. So Virginia possums are only marsupial in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, they are on that list of they don't do really well with reuniting. You've got to look at how they function as a family. The mama has these tiny little babies in her uterus that go into her pouch when they're the size of bumblebees. They are in the pouch about 55 days, and when they get older, they climb onto her back and they have to hang on for dear life. And I really mean for dear life, because if one falls off, Mom doesn't stop to get him back. She's a good mama, but she doesn't count really well. So the baby falls off, that's not independent, that's less than 10 inches from head to the base of the tail, like the little one in that picture. It automatically goes into wildlife rehabilitation facility. We can't get them reunited. So some species we find we have an easier time reuniting, and things like squirrels, raccoons, mice, the white-tailed deer, as we said, the Canada goose and eastern cottontail. These are parents that it seems to be much easier to get those babies together back with them. You know, if a baby squirrel falls out of a nest in a tree and mom's around, she climbs down the tree, she grabs that baby with her teeth and with her little paws, brings it right back to the nest. Or if a mama raccoon has babies in an attic and you block her from that attic, she will tear your house apart trying to get back to her babies. So I mean, these are animals that really, really are connected to their babies, and they'll do everything they can to make it work. But there's some again that are not as likely to succeed. There again is our Virginia opossum with the babies clinging for dear life. But things like eastern chipmunks and weasels, these are animals that tend to be underground in burrows or dens. And the problem is, we're not going to really know what's going on. Like if you get a baby chipmunk out of a den or out of its burrow, what's happening is, why did it exit when it wasn't supposed to? Is it starving because maybe mom's not around? Or did a predator find them and this is the only one that managed to leave? So not knowing what's going on where I can't see makes it very risky to put something back. And ducks, well, you never know with ducks. Mallards have been known not to be able to reunite. Others you can. You kind of never know. Now, here's another video that I didn't do because, again, I don't do good videos about eastern cottontails, but it's actually, I think, pretty helpful. And I just want to play this for you about how we can keep these babies with their parents.
Eastern cottontail rabbits can produce babies all spring and all summer long, so a lot of people will end up finding baby bunnies in their yard. Now, a rabbit nest isn't what you would expect. It's simply a shallow depression in the ground with some grass and some fur pulled from the mother that's used to cover the young. Rabbits keep their babies safe by keeping the nest hidden. She only spends a very short amount of time each day with her young. She feeds them early in the morning and then in the evening. Otherwise, she stays away. In fact, most people never even realize they have a rabbit nest in their yard unless it's discovered by a household pet or by someone doing yard work. Now, if you do find a rabbit nest, the best thing to do is to leave it alone. Even if it has been disturbed by a pet or human hands, you can put the babies back, cover them with the nesting material, and leave the area. Because you won't see the mom at the nest, what you can do is take 2 small sticks or 2 pieces of string and make an X over the top of the nest. The next day, if the X has been moved, you know that mom has come back. Baby rabbits open their eyes in about a week, and they're only with their mom for another 10 to 14 days. So during this short period of time, it's best to keep people and pets away and avoid mowing or doing yard work very close to the nest until the young have left. If you have any other questions, you can always contact us at the Conservation District's Wildlife Resource Center.
Okay, and I want to add to that a little bit, because I love my little bunnies. So when bunnies leave the nest, they look about the size of a tennis ball, about 5 inches from head to tail, and they look ridiculously helpless in the grass. And because they look so helpless, because they look like they need our attention, People very often pick them up, thinking they have to go into wildlife rehabilitation. But at the size of a tennis ball, they're already weaned, they're already able to eat grass, they're on their own and pretty much just need to be left alone. And unfortunately, sometimes people also try to keep them as pets. And not only is that illegal, they really don't make very good pets. If you want a pet rabbit, I've got a domestic rabbit, they make great pets. The other thing you're going to see on the internet, so I kind of want to warn you about, is you see this thing about putting flour around the nest to test the nest. And I think that's a horrible idea. The reason is, first of all, it doesn't work. So the expectation is you're going to see a rabbit foot in the flour. And the problem is this is not even an even surface, and mom may just jump right in the middle to feed her babies. So the odds of seeing that clear rabbit foot is very dim. And the other thing is this really makes the nest a target. That well-hidden nest now is something that's very visible to predators. And what happens if it rains a little bit or there's morning dew? That flour turns into pie dough and the whole nest is fouled up. I tend to use a tic-tac-toe pattern rather than the X because I think you get a better, evaluation of whether mom's there or not. But again, I don't use red. The reason for that is, again, it makes the nest much more visible. So this is something that I do. You can take straw or stems of weeds. You can make the pattern like this. Take a picture with your cell phone. Look in the morning and see if that's been disturbed. And that's a great way to do it. The nest isn't as visible as the other methods, and yet you still get your ability to figure out if mom's there. And the last resort is we will do this as wildlife rehabilitators. We will put a bunny up, and this is the milk line. This is milk in this baby's bunny, the belly over here. Now, couple of things. First of all, you shouldn't be handling them with bare hands. You don't want to get your scent on those babies because those babies don't have scent, but our hands do. So that's kind of a no-no. The other thing is it doesn't work all the time. And the reason it doesn't work all the time is if the baby's a little older and the belly is really furred, you're not going to see anything. Or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there may not be any milk left because the baby's already digested it. But it's one other tool in our toolkit. And just to show you just for a few minutes, this will get a little bouncy for a minute, but just to show how mama, we're going to feed her baby bunnies, whether it's on the nest. What you're going to notice, which is really interesting, is that this mother rabbit, whoops, it all bounces around. The mother rabbit, when she feeds her baby, she's different than other mammals. Mammals, most of them lie on their side and the babies feed on their stomach. But she's a prey species. She's on the lookout for being, chased, by a predator at all times. So she's in a position where she can just leap away if a predator approaches. Because of that position, look at the babies. They're on their backs. That's their tail. That's their little feet up in the air. So bunnies are a little bit different, but they're also adorable. So guidelines for reuniting, how we get this done. First of all, the animal must be healthy. There can't be injuries or illness. And honestly, that's one of the few things I can do better than the wildlife parents. I can splint a broken leg. I can give antibiotics for an infection. So I do want to make sure that that animal, before I try to reunite it with the parent, is okay and it's healthy enough to be in the wild. We have a term BAR, bright, alert, responsive, for describing that an animal has what we call normal behavior. Because if an animal is very lethargic, it can't food beg in whatever manner it does for the species, it's kind of cold, that's not an animal that's going to do very well going back in the wild because the mama, she is going to be paying most attention to those babies that are alert, they're begging really hard for food because those are the ones that are likely to survive. And remember, it's not easy being a wild animal and feeding your babies. So the ones that are bright, alert, responsive tend to get fed the most. And I have to consider the time of day or night for reuniting. Mice are much more active during the night, and so are raccoons. I've seen raccoon moms wait until dusk, so I can barely see what's going on before they retrieve their baby. So if I expect them to retrieve in the bright daylight, it may not happen. And the other part that's really critical is how long have the babies been separated from the parent? From 12 to 24 hours, if the parent is alive and healthy and it's a safe environment, I have a really good chance of getting them back with their babies and the parent together. 24 to 48 hours, it drops to about 50% for different species. After 2 days, then the odds go down. Then the parents have probably stopped looking for some of their babies. Other guidelines for relighting is we have to keep the babies warm. If we see babies that are on the ground as we're trying to figure out what to do, we got to keep them warm. Don't want to feed them unless you're a wildlife rehabilitator, but you want to keep them warm because that is going to be the way that mom knows they're alive. A cold baby, she may assume is dead or dying. I have to figure out, can I rebuild the nest or make a substitute nest? So in that nest in the picture with those little baby bunnies, if a lawnmower had spread all that nesting material all over the yard, can I put that nest back? Because one thing about bunnies' nests, you can't move them, not even a couple of feet. You've got to keep them right where they belong. That's how mom knows her babies. And I have to make sure the nesting material is there. And it goes back to, is location safe and quiet? And we're going to go into that just a little bit more, but that is critical. Mom isn't going to come back for a baby if she fears for her life. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about finding baby birds on the ground because birds are my specialty and they are one of the calls we get the most about, wildlife, on the ground. Are they orphans? Are they not orphans? So this is where you can help me a whole lot. And to do that, we first have to look at developmental ages of these birds and understanding them. So just run through this really quickly. So hatchlings, just as it sounds, are birds that just hatch from the egg, and they're very helpless. They have bare skin. Their eyes are sealed shut. They can't keep themselves warm. They don't have feathers, and normally there's moms sitting on them, brooding them, keeping them really, really warm. So these are really helpless little beings. But some birds, like this sweet little mourning dove, have a lot of down on them. And one of the things that sometimes gets confusing when I say, is your bird fully feathered? People say yes, and then I get a picture like this. Down is not the same as true feathers, and it doesn't keep a bird warm, not much warmer than bare skin. So this is still a very, very young baby bird. When they get a little older, around 5 days old, they're called nestlings. They're getting what they call pin feathers. And you can see this bird, it looks like almost like quills. And those are sheaths that keep the feather that's growing underneath protected. And when that feather is ready to emerge, that sheath gets very, very brittle. The baby birds preen them off, and then these beautiful feathers, the true feathers, emerge. But with nestlings, they're not fully feathered. They're going to still have some bare skin. And this is one of the last places where you might find they're still not feathered. So when we're trying to decide if something's a nestling or older, I look at their belly area and see if they're fully feathered. So this definitely is a nestling. And then the next stage is fledglings. And fledglings look a lot like the adult bird, except they've got very short tails. Look at, they're usually about half an inch or quarter of an inch. Sometimes they have these, what they call little tendrils of fuzz on their head. And this little guy right over here, um, he had been in the nest. And then I unzipped that little net cage and he flew up and perched there. And I said, "Congratulations, buddy. You just fledged." So here's the thing. If you see a hatchling or a nestling on the ground, it needs your help. That's it. It absolutely needs help. There is nothing to be gained by having these birds stay on the ground. And I've had people say to me, "I've been watching this baby bird with no feathers on the ground for about 6 hours. Mom hasn't come to bring it back to the nest." And that's because she can't. The squirrel moms can do that. They can grab their babies with their teeth in their hands. So can raccoons. But bird moms, they can't bring their babies back to the nest. They just can't. So any baby bird that has very little feathers cannot stay on the ground. There's nothing to be gained. They're going to have to either go back into the original nest or into care. In the meantime, we can get them off the ground and put them on some heat, which will make them a little bit less lethargic. And then we have to figure out, can we get them back into that nest? So first of all, can you find the nest? Is it the right nest? I don't want to put a baby robin in a blue jay nest. That is not going to go over good. And then can I even reach the nest? Because half the time the nests are like 30 feet off the ground and there isn't any ladder that can reach them. And why is that baby bird on the ground in the first place? Did the nest start to fall apart? Because if I put the baby back in, is it just going to fall down again? I mean, we've got to problem solve and play detective. And the other thing with nestlings or hatchlings, I've got to remember they may be injured. Fledglings, which are older, will glide down to the ground because they have true feathers. But these guys, they don't have feathers. When they fall, it's literally splat. And if they're lucky and they fall on a soft, grassy surface, maybe, maybe they're not hurt. But a lot of the time, what happens is you've got broken legs or you've got internal injuries, and I can't put them back in the nest for that. And if the baby bird has been lying in the cold grass for hours before you found them, if it's lethargic and it's not bright, alert, and responsive, it can't go back in the nest because the parent will not take the time to feed a bird like that. So I'm going to say more often than not, these guys come into care. So let's talk about how we get them into nest again and what we're going to do. On the internet, all the time, I see the kind of posters saying if you find a baby bird on the ground, make a substitute nest. If mom is really high in the tree, you just put that nest as high as you can and she'll take care of the baby. Oh, I wish that was true, but it isn't. So sadly, what happens, sometimes mom may feed the baby in that substitute nest, but what happens at night when the nighttime temperatures drop and the babies are getting cold? Mom has to brood her babies. Where is she going to go? The original nest, where she's got maybe three babies, or that substitute nest? And if you guess the original nest, you're right. So in that substitute nest, the baby dies overnight of the cold. That doesn't work. Now, there is a time that substitute nests make a lot of sense, and that is when there's either only one baby that's left or the whole nest came down. We can put all the babies in one nest. Whatever we do, do not expect the mom to be able to care for two different nests at this age. She just can't do it. So let's talk about making the substitute nests for cup nesters. So for cup nesters, you got to think about the fact it's going to be outside. Okay. People sometimes put up cardboard nests, and what happens when it rains is they fall apart and the baby's back down on the ground again. I like these kind of wicker baskets. And the reason I like the wicker baskets is they're natural material. They have drainage because we want that. And they come in all different sizes from very small to very large. You can use those margarine tubs, but if you do that, you have to drill holes in that plastic. Otherwise, if you put the plastic in there and it rains, it's going to fill with water, and that's going to either drown the babies or it's going to make them cold and wet, and they probably would die of hypothermia. So these types of net containers, wicker containers, they're fabulous. I love them. Cavity nesters, birds that nest in our bird houses or in the trees, like our woodpeckers or bluebirds, a little harder to figure that part out because they're inside the tree. It's a little harder to know what's going on, a little harder to monitor. It can work. But see this nest right over here? This happened this year. This was fantastic. A gentleman accidentally cut down a tree that had woodpeckers in it and called me up and he felt terrible. So we talked about it, and well, this was a lucky day for these woodpeckers because this gentleman was a carpenter, construction type of guy. So he kept the babies warm. He cut the log where the nest had been, and then he put a roof on it and they attached it to a nearby tree. And within minutes, the parents came again to take care of their babies. That works. You can also, if you're not quite that handy, buy some sort of, birdhouse and put that up in a tree nearby. Just again, a little bit more tricky. More do's and don'ts of renesting, and these are some of the mistakes that make it so that it doesn't work. You need to think about the size of the nest. Now, remember, bird parents, they like their nests to be kind of inconspicuous. They want to be hidden in the trees. So when you use huge baskets, it's kind of scary to them. That's not what they like. Plus, if you got the baby way at the bottom of a basket, that doesn't work for them. They're used to landing on the edge of a nest, leaning over and putting a bug in a baby's mouth. They're not used to jumping inside a basket. That can make it harder for them to accept this. The other thing is just how we hang these things. These two baskets are hung right on the trunk of trees. It's easier to do it that way, but the neighborhood cat can climb up the tree, the raccoon can climb up the tree, they can get into the nest. The birds would rather be on a thin branch with their nest that the parents can fly to, but predators can't walk on. That's what we have to do. We have to think like mama bird. And we want to have leaves overhead. It protects from direct sunlight if it's a hot day, protects from rain. It also makes it harder for that hawk overhead looking for a nice meal to see them. So again, we have to think like mama bird. Another thing that's a common mistake is people love to put grass, green grass, in the inside of these nests because it's a natural material. The trouble is it's cold. Now, if you've ever walked on the lawn in the summertime with bare feet, you feel like nice and cool grass under your feet. We don't want cool. We want our baby birds to be warm. So this doesn't work as well as you think. All right. It's just way too cold because green grass is filled with water. And sometimes people put material in because it looks warm and cozy, and it is until it rains. And then when it rains, it gets wet and it doesn't dry out fast. So we have to think again, like mama birds, they use dry twigs. The dry twigs, when it rains, the rain goes right through it, sun comes out, everything dries off, everyone warms up. Think like mama. Very common mistakes are when we put up a substitute nest. The most I wait is 2 hours to see if mom comes. And usually she comes right away if she's around. Usually within the hour, she's on that nest and feeding the babies. If she's near the nest but a little bit uncertain about it, I'll give her an extra hour. But after 2 hours, the babies have to come inside. They've got to get warmed up. They've got to get fed. Some of these babies have to be fed every 15 minutes, 14 hours a day. That's what I have to do as a foster mom for them. So if they miss hours and hours of meals, it's going to hurt their health. And I never want to keep these type of babies in a nest overnight. There's absolutely nothing to be gained. Most of our songbirds are what they call diurnal, which means they're around in the day. So come dusk, they're already roosting in trees. They're not even looking for their babies. So all the babies are doing is getting cold and they're open for predators to get them. So if it's getting towards dark and the parents haven't come and I've waited 2 hours, put the babies back inside on heat. We can try again in the morning. So size matters with nests, and I want to point this out. See how these babies are all nice squished together, and that helps them sit up and beg for food. All right, this type of food begging behavior is what they need for mom to put a bug or dad to put a bug in their mouth. So if you get a container, hopefully one that has holes like this punched in, it needs to be about the same size. You can fill in the edges with dry twigs. If not, this is what happens when they don't have that support from too large a container. It's called splayed legs. This is very dangerous. I can hopefully repair it if the birds are still young. I can do a splint. It makes the birds unhappy. It makes me unhappy as well. And I can sometimes do a repair. But if it wait too long, this can harden up with the bone in this position. And this is a bird that can't perch, can't even walk. So we never want to get splayed legs. Now, there is a myth that birds have a good sense of smell. So if you hold on to them with bare hands, mom will never take them. Well, actually, the birds that have the best sense of smell are turkey vultures, which I think is kind of funny because, what are they smelling? Roadkill? Rotten things? Ooh, okay. But that doesn't mean we want to pick up birds with bare hands like this. We don't want to get our germs on babies. We don't want to have possible germs from babies on us, but it's not our scent that's going to keep mom away. So that's kind of a myth. We just want to protect ourselves. Going to fledgling, slightly older birds for fledgling behavior. These are birds that are now fully feathered. They may not have good flight. They haven't figured out how to feed themselves and where to find the food. So they tend to glide down from the nest and the parents feed them on the ground and then they teach them things. They teach them, where to go when it rains and they teach them how to find that bug or how to get that berry off the bush and all those survival skills that are important. Sometimes I've seen people think that they belong in the nest because they thought they fell out and they put them back in the nest. They're just going to glide back down because this is the developmental stage. They do belong on the ground. I do get calls about there were 4 babies in a nest, 3 left, and 1 is left behind. What do we do for that? I say wait a little longer. So long as the parents are nearby with the babies, that might be the runt of the litter, and it might take, another 24 hours, and then it can join the parents. But if the family has left the area and the baby's still in the nest, I will take that baby into care. And just remember, there are some species of birds that fly right out of the nest. Swifts and swallows are the ones I'm thinking of. They fly from the nest immediately. They're amazing. Now, for any of our animals, not just birds, this is what observing behavior because we want to try to figure out whether an animal is healthy or not. So you don't want to wait if you see an animal that's obviously in trouble, obviously not able to stand up correctly. Look at this bird. It is not really standing. It's kind of on its butt. Its eyes are closed. It's fluffed up. It may have what we call fly strike, which is eggs from a fly that will turn into maggots, which are a disaster for animals. You might see wounds. You might see, missing feathers or fur, or an animal that can't use a leg. If you see an animal in that obvious distress, you can take them and have them warm, dark, and quiet and call a wildlife rehabilitator. If you're not sure, take a picture and then call wildlife rehabilitator, and we can help you figure out if this is normal or not normal behavior. Now let's look at location and safety, and this is the one that keeps me up at night because it's subjective. So people will call me, they'll say, I see some baby squirrels on the ground or some baby birds or whatever, and there are domestic cats in the neighborhood or feral cats in the neighborhood. Can we put all those babies into care? Well, here's the problem. They're with their parents, so they're not orphaned, injured, or sick, which is the criteria for wildlife rehabilitation. They're not necessarily safe because honestly, babies that have, cats that have, caught sight of them can very often kill them. A lot of babies die, from both feral domestic cats. But I try like crazy to keep them with the parents. So I will say, let's watch and observe. If that domestic cat really gets its eyes on that baby, yeah, I'll have to put it in care because at that point there's no way to keep it safe. But maybe the cat hasn't figured out the babies are there and mom still has a day or two and the babies can get relocated. So this is one of those judgment calls. When it comes to natural predators, though, if someone says, please take this baby into care, I know there's a fox nearby. I'm not going to do it. The fox, the hawks, the owls, those are natural predators. And that is kind of a part of nature that, we just let that happen. We hope that our babies don't get taken, but the fox needs to be able to feed its babies too, and so do the hawks. So for natural predators, we just, let nature do its thing. Now, this is another one that absolutely kind of drives me crazy, and it's city sidewalks and streets because there's a lot of birds, particularly it's the non-natives, that like to make their nests at the top of tall buildings, that are basically when the babies fledge, they fledge down to the sidewalk. The sidewalk, there's people walking. The sidewalk that's next to a street where there's cars. Is this a safe location? No. But the parents have been living in this location. They figured it out. If they can raise their babies, they can teach their babies how to stay out of the street because let's face it, you can see a ton of pigeons and you don't often see them hit by cars. They're really that smart. So I have to make a decision. Can I keep that baby with the parents, which is going to be my guiding principle? Can I do that? And sometimes there may be just the back of a store, a little alley, just one little spot where I can make sure the parents see me move the baby and they can raise that baby in safety, or at least relative safety. High traffic area for kids, that's a hard one. I remember one year there was a mama rabbit that made a nest right at the bottom of a children's slide in a public school playground. Okay. So like if the kids went down the slide, they were going to land right on top of the nest. They saw the nest before the kids hurt the babies, and people were calling me up what to do, but the parent was still around. So what we did is we made it into a science project and we had it so that the slide was off limits to the kids. It was kind of, roped off. And it was really exciting because on the day that those kids graduated from school, the bunnies graduated from their nest. I must have gotten 9 calls from the parents. If it's something where the adults can monitor and protect the nest, I'm going to keep it there. If it's a type of playground where we have zero control and kids are racing around, it may not be safe enough to keep the babies there with the parent. And construction sites are probably the worst. It's hard to get people to stop construction. There's going to be trucks, there's going to be, noise and machinery and chemicals, and just, it's just almost impossible. If we know about construction happening, that we can move babies to a safer location and keep them with their parents, we're going to do that. But if construction is happening and it's happening now, sometimes we have to take the babies away from the parent if we can't get them reunited. So this is where we're going to try to, have something interactive. There were some polls, and Andrew's going to help me because the polls, well, there was a technical glitch. So I hope, Andrew, that you're ready to help me with this one. Um, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a scenario where I'm going to give a question about an animal, and we're going to think, we're going to play detective. What additional information is needed? Because we're going to try to decide, and I'm hoping you, by the way, participate on the poll because it's anonymous. We're not going to know who's, answering what, and there's more than one right question for this one, or right answer. But you're going to try to make a decision for each scenario. Should I bring the animal to a wildlife rehabilitator? Should I monitor the animal or just leave it alone? I think it's okay. Should I try to get it reunited or renested? Or maybe that animal has to go straight to the veterinarian. So we're going to see if you can work together and kind of think about how these decisions happen, because I think this is helpful. All right, I'm going to give you the first scenario. It is during a hike. You find a fawn lying quietly in a field. So what do you do? So I'm going to be answering, asking some questions for myself, like, do I see any injuries on the fawn? Does it look healthy? All right. And I also have to remember the natural history. Remember, I said that's really important for wildlife rehabilitators. So if you don't know natural history for white-tailed deer, when the doe is ready to graze, she parks her fawn in the meadow, in the field. The fawn has very little scent, lies there quietly, and mom is far away. She's browsing. If a coyote sees her, she can run with her nice long legs, and then she can circle back to her baby. If she's standing next to her baby, the coyote's going to find her baby. So this is the way she protects her baby by not being near it. So I know that that is normal behavior. So here, and also I want to know, is there any live or dead adult deer seen? Particularly if there's a dead doe nearby that's hit by a car. I do want to know that. So those are my questions. So here's the information, and we're going to have you use this to answer the poll. The fawn appears alert and uninjured. It's lying quietly on the ground. There's no adult deer seen either dead or alive. What do we do? Let's try the poll. You could find a wildlife rehabilitator and ask the question. That's not a wrong answer. At this point, I think it's not bad to just to monitor and leave it alone. I think that that's what most of you said, and I think that that's perfectly fine. We don't really have to reunite or renest. Let's assume the mom is there, and it doesn't seem injured, so I don't need a veterinarian. So honestly, I think you guys did a great job. Awesome. Let's try another one. I'm going to make it a little harder now, okay? A friend found a fawn lying in a field and brought it home. What do you do? They've called you up, say, hey, I got this fawn, cute little Bambi. So I want to know, when did you find the fawn? I want to know, does he remember where the fawn was found? And did you see any injuries on it? Did you give the fawn anything to eat or drink? Does he see a dead doe nearby? I mean, what is happening with this? Again, back to natural history. Let's give you the full scenario. So your friend said he found the fawn about 4 hours ago. He remembered where he found it near a stream by a hiking trail. He didn't see any injuries on the fawn. He'd considered giving the fawn milk from the refrigerator, but he hadn't done it yet. He didn't see any adult deer, either dead or alive, in the area. Let's do a poll. What do you think we should do with this fawn who is now, he's now with this person? All right. And let's look at the results. So some of you said find a wildlife rehabilitator. That's not a bad thing. It gets a little tricky. In Massachusetts, there's only a couple of people with a special permit for fawns, but that's possible. Monitor, leave it alone. It is now with the guy. So I don't want to leave it with the guy. So I don't think I could leave it alone. I could leave it alone if it was in the field, but if it's with a gentleman that's not supposed to have it, I probably would try to reunite or renest. And that means you could, since he remembered exactly where he found it, it seems uninjured, bring it back and just leave it there. And you can come back the next day and see. If you can, from a distance, see if mom's around, you can do that. You don't want to stand nearby because remember, mom knows you're around. If you're standing nearby, she's not going to come near her baby. So you want to pretty much leave the area and then come back, and you trust that mom is looking for it. If it looks healthy, then let's assume mom is there. So you guys did a really good job. There's one other option, by the way. Environmental police sometimes can come, or mass wildlife officials, to put the fawn back. That is another option. I didn't give you that as an option, but it is one to talk about. All right, good job. Let's make it a little harder now. There was a baby chipmunk lying in the grass at an apartment complex. Aw, little chippy. So I'd want to know, where's the chipmunk now? Is it still in the grass? Does it have any obvious injuries? Has anybody thought about putting it on heat because it's on the grass? Anybody give it anything to eat or drink? Does anybody have an ability to transport the baby somewhere? Let's remember natural history. Where did these guys belong at this age? In a barrel under the ground. Why is this guy out of the barrel? Something wrong? That's my question. So let's give you the information. The baby chipmunk was located near a bike path where there was frequent foot traffic and children. The baby chipmunk had been in the grass for at least 6 hours. No injuries were observed. There was a tenant willing to put the chipmunk in a box and try to warm it up. The tenant didn't have a car but was willing to call around for help. What is your decision? Let's launch a poll. What do you think we should do? We all set to show it? I love it. Find a wildlife rehabilitator. That's most of you said. Now, this is a case where I wouldn't monitor and leave it alone. And the reason is this baby doesn't belong out of that barrel. All right. It just doesn't. Which means if it got out, something's wrong. Either mom got killed and it's starving to death, or maybe a predator got in there. Either way, if I leave it on the grass, chances are the kids are going to get to it or it's going to freeze to death. So I don't know that I can reunite it. I want to reunite it, but this is in that list of animals that really, really, it's a hard time to reunite because even if I could find that barrel, that hole where the chipmunks go, if I put it back in, do I know if mom's there? And the answer is no. So this is another case of I really don't think I'm going to be able to reunite. I'm just going to bring it to a wildlife rehabilitator. But you can see the decision making isn't that easy, is it? All right, you hear about a small bird, species unknown, that was found on the ground. The finder thought a parent bird was in a nearby tree. Now, is it a parent bird? So first of all, I want to know the age of the bird. Is this bird a nestling or a fledgling? And what did that adult bird look like? All right, is it a good match? Did you locate the nest? What does it look like? Are there any injuries on the bird? Any flies? It looks like it has a wing problem. Is it alert? Is it begging for food? And I do say texting a picture is really helpful because otherwise people usually say it's a little brown bird and that covers about 50 species. So this is the information. The homeowner sent a picture and the bird was confirmed to be a baby northern cardinal. Could perch a little, but was not fully feathered. There were no signs of visible injury. However, the homeowner had an outdoor cat and saw the cat playing with the bird before she was able to intervene. The bird she saw in the tree was blue and white and screaming at her. Wonder if that was a blue jay. She could not see a nest. So there was also a conversation about keeping her cat indoors. What do you want to do with this bird? Let's start the poll. All right, we got enough information here. Let's see what it looks like. And I like find a wildlife rehabilitator. And this one, by the way, a northern cardinal is a native songbird. That wildlife rehabilitator has to be someone like me with a federal permit. It is now with this person. So would I monitor or leave it alone? This little one is too young to be on the ground. It's a nestling. So it either has to go into a nest or into care. But here is the other thing. That's the same for reunite or renest. It was in the mouth of a cat. Now, this is what you may not know. Cats have very bad bacteria in their mouth. If there's even the slightest puncture of the skin under those feathers where you can't even see it, this bird would look fine, but in 3 days would be dead from a lethal infection. You could bring the animal to a vet, and they probably would then bring it to me. So this one is a lot tougher, and that's why these bird situations are tough. But this is a nestling. It can't be on the ground. It's either in the original nest, which she wasn't able to find. But even if I could find that nest, knowing it was in the cat's mouth, it's got to go either to a wildlife rehabilitator or to the vet. And that unfortunately, being in the cat's mouth closed up a lot of options. Otherwise, we could be able to reunite. And I think I got one more. There was a beautiful summer day, and this turtle was seen sunning on a rock. I love turtles. Any injuries? Any unusual construction or safety hazard? Has anyone touched or moved it? Well, this one bystander was discussing moving the turtle to a different part of the pond where they saw other painted turtles in that section that appeared older. Could these other turtles be the parents? And why are you doing bare hands, person? Let's do a poll. What do you want to do with that? Are you ready to show the poll? I love it. You could find a wildlife rehabilitator, but honestly, if there's no injuries, I would just leave it alone. One thing about turtles, they're very different. Immediately, when they're hatched from their egg, they are independent. There's no such thing as an orphan. If there is construction or something that's a safety issue, we may have to move it, but there's no parent for it. It doesn't need it. It's all independent by itself. So that's what I mean about knowing natural history. Most animals this young would need a parent taking care of it, not our amazing turtles. So good job. And you can see now, you guys did a great job, but this is not always easy making decisions. So reuniting helps keeping animals with their parents, keeping the animals in the wild and out of our facilities. It reduces the workload for wildlife rehabilitators. And I don't know if we have time. I'm going to just do a section of this just because it reminds me of spring. And it just shows how the parents love their babies. Kind of wish we didn't have snow on the ground and it looked just like this. And the baby's ready. It's even got its mouth partially open. And that's what we want. We want the babies with their parents. And that is the end of my presentation. Were there any questions that people had? I don't know if there's time. I know I went a little over than I thought. Yeah, the bunnies in the yard, they're not really underground, although occasionally you will find bunnies that will borrow a chipmunk hole if there's no chipmunk in it, and they'll kind of go in that little part of the barrel, but they're not going in deep, not like the chipmunks do. So, because remember, mom's going to straddle that hole, and they have to be able to feed for that. So that's that's one way. But most of the time, they just dig about 2 inches of the dirt, and that's it. All right. Um, let's see. Any contact numbers we should know? If you need to find a wildlife rehabilitator, let me see if I can. You can go on the mass.gov website, search for wildlife rehabilitator, and you should be able to find a map of Massachusetts that has, let me get my video back up, sorry. That should have, that should have a listing of all the licensed wildlife rehabilitators that will help you. When do wild animals start having babies? It's going to depend on the species. Some of them are already starting. We've gotten baby squirrels in February way too early. March, we're definitely going to get some, and then we're going to get hit. So depends on the species, but they're already starting to mate and make little babies. You know, it's going to happen soon. All right. Any ideas for protecting turtle eggs? They lay them in my yard and the birds just stalk them. I usually roll a little kid's toy over them. Yeah, I mean that one's a hard one. The person that's a turtle expert in the Berkshire is Tracy Zustra for Berkshire Turtle Rescue, is the expert for turtles in the area, and she can talk more about that. Sometimes, yeah, we can protect the eggs a little bit with just a minor barrier until they're ready to hatch. Because you're right, a lot of times, you know, they're eaten before they do anything. So, but if you want, look up Berkshire Turtle Rescue, but you know, it is okay just to put some sort of like a laundry basket with a brick on top, weighting it down. But you've got to be careful once those turtles hatches, you want to be able to let them go free. Any rodenticide poisoning in rabbits? Fortunately, no. Rodenticide poisoning is horrible. I hate it. My rabbits are herbivores, and the rodenticide poisoning is primarily people, the animals that are going to be like the raptors, the fox, the raccoons, animals that eat other animals, carnivores. So the animals in particular that will eat the rats and the mice are the ones that tend to get the secondary rodenticide poisoning. It is crazy what we're doing in the world that we, you know, putting up bait boxes and it kills all the predators that keep the rodents in control. And then what happens is there's just more rodents. And the only people winning those types of battles or getting money are the pest control companies. Because we're not controlling rodents with bait boxes. We're killing the predators and ruining our wildlife ecosystem. So yeah, I mean that's horrible. Rehabbers in Berkshire County, we don't have enough. There are some, but we don't have enough. And then you can look on the map on that one. Oh, here's one. I have a house finch at my feeder with probably conjunctivitis. I'm supposed to empty and clean the feeder well, but won't the feeder be recontaminated as soon as the bird returns? Yes. Okay. So first of all, if you can capture the finch, there are treatments for mycoplasmal conjunctivitis. It's a 3-week session program for me to keep them before the microbe clears their system adequately for release. If you find a bird that is at your feeder, if there's only one, you can clean the feeder, you can disinfect it because it can't be just clean, it has to be disinfected, empty all the seed, put it back up. But if you get even one more bird, you take the feeders down for 2 weeks at least. You've got to disperse them because you're right. The minute another bird sticks its beak on that feeder and those germs are deposited, the next bird that gets it is going to get sick. So feeders are, disease spreaders for mycoplasma conjunctivitis. So yeah, but if you capture the bird, let me know. Is it true that in addition to putting out birds, you should put out some kind of grit? The grit is important for some types of birds. Mourning doves, pigeons, they are birds that eat seeds whole. They need grit in their crop to kind of grind it up. Other birds, like say blue jays, will crack open, say black oil seeds and eat the meat from that seed, and they don't need the grit as much. So some birds, like the columbiform type, the mourning doves, pigeons types, they do need the grit. Some other birds don't need it as much. Okay. All right. All right. I think, is there any other last minute questions? Guys, you're really great, and I'm sorry it went so long. Um, I'm hoping that this is helpful. If anything, it shows you just how hard it is to make decisions sometimes about wildlife, and sometimes it's a big judgment call. But if we all work together, my belief is it takes a full community to save wildlife. I can't do it by myself, neither can any one person. If we work together, we will save more animals, and they need our help because it's tough being a wild animal out there. So thank you for being part of the solution, each and every one of you. And I want to thank you for being a part of this presentation with me. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, Judy.